Why were thousands of fans furious after seeing Messi? Why was Pakistan's Prime Minister seated with Putin and Rajab Tayyip Erdogan while India's Prime Minister wasn't even invited? And why is Pakistan's military sending a quiet signal? Not loud, not dramatic, but impossible to ignore. A strange thing happened in India, and something even more interesting happened outside India at the same time. On one side, chaos inside a stadium in Kolkata, the Salt Lake Stadium in Kolkata, while on the other hand, quiet but powerful meetings reshaping Eurasian politics. At first glance, these stories don't belong together, but once you connect them, they start telling a bigger story. Let's start with Kolkata. Lionel Messi, a famous footballer, arrives in India, a global icon, a once in a generation football legend, and thousands of fans gathered at the Salt Lake Stadium hoping for just a glimpse, maybe a wave, maybe a moment they'll remember forever. But what actually happens there? Messi stays inside the venue for barely 20 minutes. VIPs, they are getting selfies. Celebrities, they are getting access. Regular fans, nothing. No appearance, no acknowledgement, no moment. And then something unusual happens. Bottles start flying onto the ground. Fans erupt in anger. Not only bottles, but the chairs as well. We have seen videos. Social media explodes. Some reports even claim that Shah Rukh Khan was ignored, which only fueled the frustration further. Whether fully accurate or exaggerated, the perception mattered. People felt sidelined. Ask yourself a question: how does a country that calls itself the world's largest democracy, viewers, fail to manage a public event involving the world's biggest sports star? Why does it always feel like excess is reserved for the elite while the masses are treated like background noise? This wasn't just about Messi. This was about the public trust, expectations, and how badly these optics were handled. And while people in India were arguing over selfies and stadium access, a very different picture was emerging abroad. Thousands of kilometers away in Turkmenistan, something far more strategic was unfolding. While Indian leadership was busy projecting images from overseas trips, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif was sitting down with two of the most influential leaders, you can say, in the today's world: Russia's Vladimir Putin, the president, and Turkey's President Rajab Tayyip Erdogan. No drama, no noise, just diplomacy. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Indian social media and some outlets quickly pushed a narrative. What was that narrative? That narrative was that Pakistan's Prime Minister was kept waiting. He waited for like 40 minutes, that meetings were staged. Some even went as far as claiming a fake Putin met him. Sounds absurd, right? Because it was. President Erdogan himself stepped in and clearly rejected these claims. He stated that his meeting with Prime Minister of Pakistan, Shehbaz Sharif, was placed at the top of his protocol schedule, followed later by his meeting with the President of Russia, Putin. That's not symbolism, that's priority. So now, the real question becomes, if Pakistan is being sidelined globally, why are the world leaders giving it front row access? Why are Russia, Turkey, Turkey, China, and even the United States increasingly engaging Islamabad on regional stability along with the energy routes, security, and connectivity? This is where the idea of Pakistan as a Eurasian pivot comes into play. Geographically, politically, and strategically, Pakistan sits at the crossroads of South Asia, Central Asia, and Middle East, the China's Belt and Road vision as well. And great powers don't invest time in countries they consider irrelevant. You're getting my point, I hope so. So that when narratives clash, selfies versus strategy, which one actually shapes the future? This contrast is becoming harder to ignore. Inside India, public anger, poor event management, narratives built on denial and damage control outside India. What's happening? Pakistan engaging with major powers, being consulted, not lectured, being positioned, not dismissed. This isn't about nationalism. It's about diplomatic momentum. And it's really a hard time for India. The momentum is something you either build quietly or lose loudly. Now, let's bring in the third piece because this one explains that why Pakistan, Islamic Republic of Pakistan, is being taken seriously. Pakistan's military signal, quite but clear. What happened? Field Marshal Sayyid Asim Munir, Pakistan's Chief of Army Staff and Chief of Defence Forces, the first Chief of Defence Forces in the history of Pakistan, visited Gujranwala and Sialkot garrisons. On the surface, this looks routine, but when you look closer, he wasn't just reviewing troops. You must know that the Indian borders lies in Sialkot. He was observing advanced simulator training, field exercises, and anti-tank drone capabilities right near sensitive border regions. And that border lies with India. Successful drone strikes against armored targets were demonstrated. Modern warfare scenarios were rehearsed, and the messaging was consistent. What was the messages? What was actually the message? Adaptability, precision, technology-driven readiness. He emphasized that modern conflicts aren't just fought on borders anymore. They are fought through hybrid tactics, information warfare, extremist narratives, and psychological pressure. And here's the key line. Pakistan's armed forces remain fully focused on both internal and external challenges. No slogans, no chest thumping, just preparedness. By late 2025, in December, Asim Munir, Field Marshal and the Chief of Defence Forces, is already being described as one of the most influential military leaders in the region, not because of the speeches, but because of the structure, because of the discipline and modernization. So now connect the dots, the bigger picture. A frustrated public watching elites enjoying excess. A country struggling with perception management. Another country quietly positioning itself at diplomatic tables. A military modernizing without noise. This isn't coincidence, it's contrast. Power today isn't about who talks the loudest. It's about who gets invited into the room when decisions are being made. And right now, the invitations tell a story that you cannot deny, a story that you cannot neglect. So here's the final question I leave you with. In a world where perception matters as much as power, who's managing the both? And who's losing control of the narrative? Drop your thoughts below because this shift isn't loud, but it's real and I'll be watching it closely. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.